The quiet hum of hospital machines echoed through the sterile emergency room. The fluorescent lights above cast an eerie glow over the room. But nothing was as unsettling as the rapid beeping of the monitor. In the bed, 4-month-old Rachel convulsed violently, her tiny body seizing uncontrollably. Dr. Lisa Carter's heart raced. She was no longer the doctor, just a mother. She grabbed her daughter's hand, her medical training momentarily forgotten, replaced by raw fear. "Please, God, not my baby," Lisa whispered, her voice trembling. She looked up, but the man she'd always relied on, her husband John, stood frozen at the door, a silent witness to the terror unfolding. Their rescue dog, Tiny, who had been a constant presence by Rachel's side, let out a soft whimper, his usual playful demeanor replaced with distress. But it wasn't the beeping monitors or the chaotic scene that brought them to attention. It was the strange, unexplainable action of the dog that stunned everyone in the room. As Dr. Anderson barked orders to clear the room, Tiny refused to leave. His eyes never left Rachel's crumpled form. The room was chaos. Nurses shouted orders. Medical staff rushed to adjust 4 lines. But in the midst of the storm, Tiny's behavior shifted. The dog, once frightened and confused, now stood alert and resolute. The monitors that had once shown distress now began to stabilize. The tremors in Rachel's body slowly ceased, and her breathing steadied. Dr. Anderson stood speechless, staring at the child and the dog beneath the bed. "I've never seen anything like this," he muttered, his voice shaky. Lisa and John exchanged a look, tears streaming down their faces. Could this be a miracle? This night would mark the beginning of a journey that would challenge everything they knew about love, family, and the unexpected ways life can change. It all started with a moment of terror, one that no one could have predicted, and a small, yet determined, dog. Lisa and John sat side by side in the hospital room, Rachel nestled in her mother's arms, her tiny body now peaceful after the terrifying ordeal. Tiny lay beneath the bed, his watchful eyes never leaving Rachel, as if he understood the weight of his role. The room, once filled with the frantic energy of doctors and nurses, was now quiet, the hum of the machines a soft backdrop to the overwhelming silence between Lisa and John. John's mind was spinning, the events of the night too surreal to fully process. Tiny, the dog that had stood by their side through every heartbreak and joy, had somehow managed to calm their daughter during the most terrifying moment of their lives. How did a dog do that? What had he sensed? "I don't know what to make of this," John muttered, his voice filled with awe and confusion. He looked at Tiny, his gaze softening as the dog lay perfectly still, seemingly exhausted yet satisfied. Tiny had always been there for Rachel from the first day they brought her home to this fateful night. But tonight, he had been something more, something extraordinary. Lisa's eyes were fixed on their daughter, her small hand gripping Rachel's tightly. She, too, was struggling to understand the unexplainable. Could it be? Could he have saved her? She whispered, as if speaking the words aloud would make them real. John nodded, his hand gently rubbing Tiny's ruffled fur. Maybe. His voice was steady, though his heart raced. But how? What was he doing? Lisa shook her head, unsure. As a doctor, she knew better than anyone the limits of medical science. But what they had just witnessed didn't fit any textbook. It defied all logic and reason. And yet, here they were, with their daughter's life still intact, thanks to a dog. Their lives, which had once seemed so perfectly planned, had become something entirely different. For years, they had struggled to conceive, their dreams of a family shattered with each failed attempt, each negative test. But tonight, in the midst of their greatest fear, a dog had stepped in and, in his own way, given them hope. The doctors hadn't yet explained what had caused Rachel's seizure, but they'd managed to stabilize her. The cause remained uncertain, but they were hopeful that with further testing, they would have answers. Yet for now, all that mattered was that she was alive. And Tiny, with his loyal eyes and protective nature, had played a crucial part in that. "I think we need to stop questioning it," Lisa said softly, her eyes meeting John's. "We're still here. Rachel's still with us, and Tiny, he's not just a dog. He's a guardian. John squeezed her hand. He's more than that. He's part of our family. Lisa smiled, her heart full of emotion. For all the plans they'd made, all the pain they had endured, they had never expected to find their greatest miracle in this form. A rescue dog with a heart just as big as his spirit. It was in this moment, as Tiny curled up at the foot of their daughter's bed, that they realized they had been given a gift far beyond what they could have ever hoped for. It wasn't a child of their own blood, nor was it the perfect life they had dreamed of. But in their hearts, they knew that the love they had for Rachel, and now for Tiny, was just as real, just as deep. Their journey was far from over. The road ahead would be filled with challenges they hadn't yet imagined, but they knew they were no longer walking it alone. They had each other, and they had Tiny, their unexpected hero. Weeks passed in a blur of therapy sessions, doctor's visits, and sleepless nights. Life, as Lisa and John had known it, no longer existed. Their Victorian house, once filled with the quiet hum of their careers and routine, had transformed into a place of constant care. The nursery, once a symbol of dreams deferred, was now a medical station filled with specialized equipment. Every inch of their home was now dedicated to Rachel's needs. Despite the demands, they had learned to embrace their new normal. Rachel's progress, though slow, was steady. Tiny, ever watchful, had become not just a companion, but a vital part of their healing journey. He seemed to understand more than any of them. At times, he'd gently nudge Rachel's leg during her physical therapy sessions, as though cheering her on. His presence had a calming effect on the baby, and his watchful eyes brought a sense of security to Lisa and John. But as they settled into their new routine, the world outside their home began to change too. The initial shock of Rachel's arrival had worn off, and now they were met with the challenges of a society that wasn't quite ready for their unconventional family. At the park, Lisa noticed the subtle shift in the way other parents treated her. It started with whispers behind her back, their voices low and full of pity. Then, it became more apparent. Other mothers would gather their children and move away when Lisa pushed Rachel's stroller. The looks, the avoidance, and the awkward conversations made it clear. They were different. One day, as Lisa and Rachel settled into their usual spot at the park, she overheard a conversation between two women. "I just don't think it's safe for my kids to be around a child like that," one woman said, her voice tinged with discomfort. The words hit Lisa like a slap in the face. She wanted to say something, to stand up for her daughter, but all she could do was hold Rachel a little closer, trying to shield her from the ignorance surrounding them. "Mommy, look, a puppy." Rachel's giggle broke through the tension, and Lisa smiled, despite the hurt that lingered in her chest. Tiny, who had been sitting quietly by her side, perked up at the sound of the child's voice, his ears twitching as he stood and walked over to Rachel's stroller. Seeing the dog's calm demeanor, the other mothers paused. They watched as Tiny gently nudged Rachel's stroller, his nose nudging Rachel's tiny hand. Lisa saw the look in their eyes, their skepticism starting to fade, replaced by curiosity and perhaps a hint of respect. John, who had been working late on his company's latest project, arrived shortly after, sensing the shift in the air. He stood beside Lisa, offering a quiet smile as Tiny lay down at Rachel's feet. The peaceful interaction between the baby and the dog seemed to ease the tension that had been building between Lisa and the other mothers, though it didn't erase the underlying prejudice. It was a small victory. In that moment, Lisa realized that her family might not fit into society's neatly packaged ideals, but that didn't matter. Rachel was beautiful, Tiny was loyal, and their family was bound together by a love that was stronger than the whispers and stares. But even as they began to adjust to the harsh realities of judgment, another challenge was waiting for them. John's tech company, which had once been a source of pride and promise, began to falter. The mounting pressure from Rachel's care was taking its toll on him. Product launches were delayed, meetings were missed, and investors grew impatient. The work he had once loved now seemed like a distant memory, overshadowed by the constant needs of their daughter. Maybe it's time for me to step back, John said one night, as they sat in the living room after another long day. His voice was heavy with frustration. I can't keep doing this. Rachel's needs come first. Lisa reached for his hand, squeezing it tightly. You've always been a fighter, John. You've built something incredible, and we've come this far because of your strength. But this is different. John ran a hand through his hair. I just don't know if I can do it all anymore. The company, the baby, everything. Lisa's heart ached as she watched the man she loved struggle under the weight of it all. But just as they were about to discuss their next steps, Tiny wandered over to them, his eyes wide with understanding. The dog, who had been a constant presence in their lives, seemed to sense their need for comfort. Tiny placed his head on John's lap, looking up at him with an expression of calm certainty. For a moment, the world outside their home seemed to vanish, and all that remained was the quiet love shared between them and the dog. I think we're going to be okay, John said, his voice softer now, his gaze meeting Lisa's. We've made it through so much. We can handle this too. Lisa nodded, her heart swelling with pride. She knew that they had no control over the challenges ahead, but they would face them together. And with Tiny by their side, they had already learned what true strength meant. It wasn't about perfection. It wasn't about the world's expectations. It was about love, the love they shared as a family and the love Tiny had shown for them. Days turned into weeks, and the Browns' new normal continued to unfold. Their home, once filled with quiet routines and the occasional clink of coffee mugs, now thrummed with the constant hum of medical equipment. Every room held a different need. The living room was now a makeshift physical therapy area. The kitchen was dedicated to specialized meal prep, and the nursery, once filled with hopes of toys and laughter, had become an intricately planned care unit. The exhaustion was mounting. Lisa had reduced her hours at the hospital, but even with her best efforts to juggle her professional life with Rachel's needs, the strain was beginning to show. Her usually composed demeanor had given way to quiet, hidden fatigue. Nights spent comforting Rachel after her therapy sessions often stretched into hours of worry, her mind constantly racing with medical reports, possible outcomes, and the endless list of things that needed to be done. John, too, found himself drained. His company, which had once been his passion, now seemed like a distant dream. He spent long nights brainstorming adaptive technology solutions for special needs children, but the hours were taking their toll. The family savings, once earmarked for vacations and plans of future expansion, were now being diverted to Rachel's medical care, equipment, and therapy. And yet, through it all, Tiny was their anchor. The dog, who had once simply been a pet, had evolved into a silent hero in their home. His presence was a constant source of comfort, his loyalty never wavering. Tiny had become Rachel's protector, her constant companion through the grueling therapy sessions and long nights. The dog's watchful eyes never left her side, even as the weight of responsibility began to weigh heavily on the Browns. One evening, as Lisa worked on Rachel's therapy routine, John sat in the corner, his head in his hands. It had been a long day of conference calls, investor negotiations, and scrambling to keep his company afloat. His body felt as though it had been pushed beyond its limit, but he couldn't stop. Not now. Not when they had come so far. Lisa, noticing the tension in her husband's posture, walked over and placed a hand on his shoulder. You've been going nonstop, John. You need a rest. We both do. John looked up, his eyes heavy with fatigue. I can't stop. I have to keep going. We need the money for Rachel's treatment. I can't let everything fall apart. I know you're doing everything you can, Lisa replied, her voice soft but firm. But we're not in this alone. We have each other, and we have Tiny. We're a team. John managed a tired smile, reaching for her hand. I just feel like I'm failing at everything. The company, Rachel's care. I don't know how much longer I can do this. Before Lisa could respond, Tiny walked over and laid his head gently on John's lap. It was a small gesture, but it spoke volumes. The dog's eyes were full of understanding, his calm demeanor a reminder that, no matter how chaotic their world had become, they were still together. They were still a family. Tiny's presence was more than just emotional support. In his own quiet way, he had begun to help with Rachel's progress in ways that no one had expected. During therapy sessions, he had learned to assist, nudging Rachel's legs or offering comfort when she became frustrated. He had an uncanny ability to sense when Rachel needed a break or when she needed to push herself harder. On the days when Lisa felt overwhelmed, Tiny was always there, sitting quietly beside her, as if reminding her that she was doing her best. And in those moments of exhaustion, Tiny's gentle presence provided a much-needed sense of peace. But despite the love and support from Tiny, the outside world was becoming increasingly difficult to navigate. The prejudice and judgment that they had briefly brushed off earlier had now begun to take root in their community. At the local grocery store, parents would subtly pull their children away when they saw Rachel in her stroller. At the park, whispers followed them wherever they went. Lisa tried to ignore the stares, to focus on Rachel and Tiny, but it was hard. It was hard to constantly feel like they were different. It was hard to explain to people who didn't understand why Rachel needed a service dog, or why they couldn't just let her be normal. One afternoon, while shopping for groceries, Lisa overheard a conversation between two women. One of them, who had once been friendly, now stood in the aisle, her voice laced with judgment. "I just don't know if it's safe for my kids to be around that child," she said, her eyes flicking nervously to Rachel. Lisa's stomach twisted, but she kept walking. She refused to let their ignorance affect her anymore. She had her family. She had Tiny, and that was all that mattered. But even as they weathered the storm of social prejudice, something unexpected happened. One day, as Lisa was pushing Rachel's stroller down the street, a neighbor, who had always kept her distance, came over to speak with her. "I just wanted to say," the woman hesitated, her voice soft, "I've seen how you care for Rachel. I know it's been hard, but you and John, you're doing a great job." The unexpected kindness took Lisa by surprise. The woman had never been anything but distant, yet here she was, offering a simple but much-needed word of encouragement. Lisa smiled, grateful for the rare moment of compassion. Later that evening, John returned from work, tired but determined. He could see the change in Lisa's eyes. The frustration was still there, but now there was something else, something stronger. "How was your day?" he asked, taking a seat beside her on the couch. "It was tough," she said, her voice tinged with exhaustion. "But there was this one moment. One of the neighbors came over and said she saw how hard we were trying. She said we were doing a good job." John's expression softened. "I'm glad you got that. You've been so focused on everything else that I think you forgot to see how amazing you're doing." Lisa rested her head on his shoulder, closing her eyes for a moment. The weight of their reality was always there, but now they were starting to see glimpses of the strength they had built, strength that came not just from their love for Rachel, but from their love for each other, and from the unexpected hero that lay curled up at their feet. Tiny, their loyal dog, was their reminder that sometimes the greatest strength comes from the most unexpected places. The days following Rachel's arrival were the hardest Lisa and John had ever faced. The constant worry over her medical care, the therapy sessions that stretched into hours of exhaustion, and the emotional toll of being judged by the very community they had once been so deeply connected to, it all weighed on them. But there were moments, small moments, that reminded them of why they had fought so hard. Tiny had become more than just a therapy dog. He was their anchor, their protector, and their lifeline. And through it all, he had remained by their side, never wavering in his dedication to Rachel and to them. But now another challenge had emerged. Rachel had been progressing steadily in her therapy, her muscles slowly responding to the exercises, her strength returning bit by bit. But Lisa and John knew that the road ahead would be long. The doctors had said there was potential for full mobility, but they couldn't promise anything. And so, the weight of every decision, every small step forward, felt as if it could tip them into the unknown. One chilly morning, as the sun began to rise over the Boston skyline, John sat at the kitchen table, his laptop open before him. He had been up early, catching up on emails from his company, still working tirelessly to keep his business afloat. Rachel, who had grown stronger with each passing day, lay on a mat in the living room, her legs being carefully moved through their range of motion by Lisa. Tiny, as usual, sat by her side, watching with attentive eyes. Suddenly, Tiny's ears perked up. He stood and trotted over to Rachel, nuzzling her gently. Lisa looked up, puzzled. "Tiny? What is it, boy?" Without warning, Tiny barked, sharp and insistent. It wasn't his usual playful bark. This one was filled with urgency. Rachel stirred, her small body twitching as if something was wrong. Lisa's heart skipped a beat. "John," she called, her voice tight with panic. John rushed in from the kitchen, his face etched with concern. "What's wrong?" Lisa was already on her knees beside Rachel, checking her vitals. Her breathing, it's erratic. Something's wrong. In that moment, the calm and composed mother, the doctor, was pushed aside. All that mattered was Rachel, their daughter, who, in that instant, seemed to be slipping away from them. The monitor beside Rachel's crib beeped erratically, sending a wave of panic through Lisa. Her professional instincts kicked in, but they were no match for the overwhelming fear that gripped her chest. John, who had seen Lisa face countless medical emergencies with steady hands, felt the panic rise in his own chest. "What do we do? What do we do?" he whispered, helpless. Tiny didn't wait for anyone. The dog's natural instinct took over as he moved closer to Rachel, positioning himself between her and the parents. His posture was protective, his body poised to guard her. Lisa, still fighting against her own fear, began performing the emergency procedure they'd practiced over and over, though she never thought she'd have to use it on her own child. Seconds felt like hours. John dialed 911 with trembling hands, his voice shaking as he relayed the emergency. Tiny remained steadfast, his eyes never leaving Rachel's tiny face, his growls low and continuous, as if to warn anyone who would dare to come near. The minutes stretched on, but just as the ambulance arrived, Rachel's breathing steadied. The frantic beeping of the monitor slowed, and Lisa breathed a shaky sigh of relief. She looked up, meeting John's eyes, and saw the same mixture of disbelief and gratitude mirrored there. Tiny hadn't just been a companion during the quiet moments. In this, their greatest moment of need, Tiny had been the unwavering protector they hadn't even known they needed. At the hospital, the doctors confirmed that Rachel's condition had been exacerbated by an unexpected complication, a small but critical issue in her respiratory system. They explained that, while it wasn't life-threatening, it could have been. Without Tiny's intervention, without his protective instinct and alertness, they might not have caught it in time. As Lisa and John sat in the hospital's consultation room, Tiny curled up at Rachel's feet, they both realized something that changed their perspective forever. Their family wasn't defined by their struggles or the judgment they faced. It wasn't about the perfect life they'd imagined or the perfect child. It was about love, the fierce, unrelenting love they had for Rachel and for each other, and the miraculous ways it had transformed their world. Over the following weeks, Rachel continued to improve. The road ahead was still uncertain, but Lisa and John had learned something important from the experience. Life would never be easy, and their journey with Rachel would continue to challenge them in ways they couldn't even imagine. But they were ready. They were stronger now, together, and nothing, not even the harshest challenges, could tear them apart. Tiny had shown them the power of resilience, the power of unconditional love, and the power of standing by each other when everything seemed impossible. The Browns' journey has shown us that sometimes the most unexpected moments can change our lives forever. In their story, they learned to face fear, uncertainty, and prejudice with unwavering strength and love. Tiny, the dog who was once just a pet, became a true hero in their lives, reminding us that love and loyalty can come in forms we least expect. Through their struggles, they showed us that family isn't about perfection. It's about the love and care we share, no matter the obstacles we face. Thank you for watching. If you have a story of your own, please leave a comment below and share it with us. And if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to the HeartForce channel for more stories that inspire and move us. We'd love to hear from you.